Welcome. Apologies. Welcome members to today's special meeting held in Derry City and Strabane District Council. As per usual, I'm going to pass now to John to take us through agenda 1 and 2. John.
Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, members. To all members of Derry City and Strabane District Council, you're hereby summoned to attend a special meeting of the Council to be held today, the 11th of March 2022 at 2 p.m. remotely. Starting with the roll call, Alderman Breslin. Alderman Breslin. Alderman Devaney.
Here, John.
Alderman Guy. Alderman Guy. Alderman Hussey.
Hi, John. Here.
Alderman Carrigan. Alderman Carrigan. Alderman McClintock.
Here, John.
Alderman McCready. Alderman McCready. Alderman Ramsey.
Apologies, John.
Alderman Wark.
Here, John.
Councillor Jason Barr.
Here, John.
Councillor Raymond Barr.
Here, John.
Councillor John Boyle.
I'm logging on another computer. I'm on Councillor Riley's at the minute.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
And Shaw, John.
Councillor Carr.
Here, John.
Councillor Cusick.
Here, John.
Councillor Dobbins.
Here, John.
Councillor Donnelly.
And Shaw.
Councillor Doyle.
Here, John.
Councillor Duffy.
And Shaw.
Councillor Edwards.
And Shaw, John.
Councillor Farrell.
Here.
Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Fleming.
Shaw, John.
Councillor Gallagher.
And Shaw.
Councillor Harkin.
Here.
Councillor Heaney.
Shaw.
Councillor Jackson.
Shaw, John.
Councillor Kelly. Councillor Logue.
John.
Councillor McGinley.
And Shaw, John.
Councillor McGowan.
Shaw, John.
Councillor McGuire. Councillor McGuire. Councillor McHugh. Councillor McHugh. Councillor McKeever. Councillor McKeever. Councillor McKinney. Councillor McKinney. Councillor Mooney.
Here, John.
Councillor O'Neill.
Here, John.
Councillor Riley.
Here, John.
Councillor Sinoy Barr.
Here, John.
Councillor Tierney.
Here, John.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, could I just say Alderman Kerrigan's trying to get on his phone the minute his iPad isn't working at the moment, so he should be in the next few moments.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, members. Moving on now to agenda 3. Step in the rule meetings. I would like to remind everyone who's remote attendance that this meeting will be broadcast live via the council YouTube channels and will be available for viewing to the public and media. The broadcast will also be available for repeated viewing at a later date. This broadcast may be to terminate or suspend in accordance with council protocol. Members and crew speakers are reminded to only have their mics on, cameras on while speaking at the meeting, and chat facilities silent and request to speak. By participating in this meeting, you're considering being filmed and the use of storage for those images broadcast on training purposes for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. A copy of the council privacy notice may be found on the council website. Okay, members. Agenda 4, declaration of members' interest. If there's any declarations of members' interest, please highlight now on the screen or on the chat box. Okay, members, thank you. Moving on, chairperson's business. There is no chairperson's business today, so what I'm going to do now is move to agenda 6 and pass on now to John. John?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, when the notice of motion, when the request for the full council meeting came in at the beginning of the week, the original request asked for officers to consider practical measures or practical actions that members may or may not wish to consider. We have met as a senior management team a number of times this week just to consider all of our service areas and all of the activities that we're currently involved in to see what can or can't be suggested into this meeting. It's a matter for yourself, Mayor and members, but we have a few slides that we've prepared to help guide the meeting today in anticipation of being asked, but obviously it's a matter for yourself whether you wish to receive those now or at some point during the meeting. Sorry? You would like to? Okay. Well, members, just as I have two colleagues here with me, Una McGillion and Alfie Dallas. As I say, we've set out a few slides, just setting the overall context. First of all, the whole issue and around, as you know, members, through various notices of motion, we've been working on various medium to long-term poverty initiatives throughout the council area. So just reminding us of that work, which will certainly not have an immediate impact, but is definitely worth considering in context. But from a lot of that work, we've been able to ascertain some of the immediate issues that our citizens are facing at the moment, and we're just outlining some of those. And then, as I've said, we're considering the wider pressures in council. Obviously, as the cost of living issues and some of the issues that we're facing as individuals and our citizens are facing as individuals at the moment. Council corporate is also experiencing some very significant forthcoming financial pressures. So Alfie will come in on those. But then we've a number of slides where we've gone through some of the measures that you as members have taken in the past, and in particular during the COVID crisis, and are suggesting some areas that you might want to consider going forward, notwithstanding any notices of motion that come forward this afternoon. And of course, the direction of travel today is entirely up to yourselves, members, but it's in response to the request you made of us to consider some practical actions. So with your permission, we'll run through these slides. We'll keep them very short and to the point, and obviously wish to pass back to yourselves to lead and steer the meeting. Thank you. So over to Una.
Thank you, John, and good afternoon, members. Members, as John said, I've got a few slides that I just want to take you through, and the next slide just sets that context that John has referred to in terms of the work that we have been involved in, particularly around the work of the anti-poverty task and finish group. And you'll recall that last year that there was two motions that came forward, one for the development of the action plan and the other one for a hardship fund. And members, we allocated over £90,000 at that stage to support some different interventions that we felt that would have an immediate impact. What's very important for us, obviously, is the strategic context of the new Northern Ireland anti-poverty strategy. And we have DFC officials coming now to meet the anti-poverty task group in 2 weeks' time, just to give us an update in terms of the progress of that strategy and how we can play a part towards influencing the need for targeted interventions within the Northwest. Members, you know that this takes a very significant partnership approach in terms of tackling poverty and vulnerability, and for that reason we see a lot of the medium to long-term actions coming out of the Strategic Inclusive Growth Plan and also the City Deal and the Inclusive Future Fund. But none of that will be possible, obviously, without the significant support of our statutory and voluntary community sector and our statutory partners. Our community and voluntary sector played an absolute blinder whenever it came to COVID support, and without their absolute passion and determination in making sure that support was delivered, and obviously with that partnership approach with the government departments in terms of providing the funding. But that's obviously always in the context that as a council, we're committed to doing everything that we possibly can, and you can see that from the reports that come through on a regular basis. Members, two final points within the context is that we have undertaken very significant research in terms of identifying the needs for poverty and vulnerability locally, which is really, really important for us, and also the huge learning that we've had from the COVID-19 support and the delivery that we've had. We've got really important lessons learned from that. So members, that takes us in terms of just a couple of very, very quick points in relation to poverty in the council area. All of this you will already know in terms of the numbers of people that are facing poverty and the very, very significant link between poverty and ill health, that a lot of the poverty now within our council area is actually affected by people who are in employment, who are maybe on a minimum wage or low wages. We know that there's huge number of people who've never had to seek support before, and that's certainly the evidence that's coming through from a lot of the support organisations, and they've got some difficulty in terms of both seeking help and also in terms of a feeling that they've got a stigma towards actually acknowledging that they need help. The most vulnerable within our community tends to be lone parents, the working poor and households with dependents with disabilities. So members, that takes us in terms of, you know, the challenges, which is in the next slide, and this is obviously why we're here today in terms of those needs. So we know about the household costs of fuel, energy and food, and also we really want to highlight today, which has really come to the fore, is in terms of the cost of transport for pupils attending school. So whilst more and more pressure has been put on households in terms of paying for food and fuel, unfortunately, parents now are having to ask the question if they can afford the £10 a week per child for some of the transportation costs, which will have a really massive impact in terms of attendance from some very, very vulnerable young people. There's been some brilliant initiatives in terms of coming from government and some of those interventions, which is great, but unfortunately not all households who need support will actually benefit from those, and that's just simply because of the situation that we have at the minute. We know that there's households that are currently in debt, and we know that the support organisations have given us a real indication that they're afraid for people who maybe incur costs for repairing their car, repairing a household piece of equipment, where that will go in the future. Members, whenever we prepared these slides, the minimum purchase price for oil was at 190. That's now actually increased to 215 for 150 litres of home heating oil. So that's a really, really big implication. Charities such as St Vincent de Paul and Salvation Army have told us that they have never witnessed anything like the number of inquiries that has come forward. In actual fact, St Vincent de Paul put out a press release to indicate that they've almost 500% increase in the month of February in terms of inquiries for support in comparison to February of last year. Salvation Army said that they've now people come to them that would never have come before. And obviously, ill health is a major implication in terms of people really, really facing very, very dire situation. So the next slide sets out what we consider to be the needs, you know, what's the immediate support that's required. So obviously it's trying as best as possible to increase household income, and that can come from various sources, whether that be benefits, whether that be higher wages, whether that be vouchers and so forth. Decrease to the household costs where those costs can be kept in a minimum, and obviously there's a lot of advice out there in terms of fuel poverty, in terms of being able to access different grants towards insulation and so forth. But the biggest thing really is giving people advice to where they can benefit from different sources of support that's already out there, whether that be benefits, debt solutions, hardship support and so forth. There's some brilliant interventions in terms of managing household budgets in times of austerity, and there's different programmes, particularly within the community and voluntary sector, offering that. The sector tells us that they're really concerned about messaging and payday lenders, where people may be forced into making a decision about needing money very, very quickly, and they go down this route, which will have massive implications going forward. And around positive mental health, really supporting people in their time of vulnerability. I'm going to pass now over to Alfie for the next two slides, which looks at the legal and financial implications.
Thank you, Una. So, as Una has said, I'm going to just run through quickly 2 slides in relation to legal and financial considerations. Members, it's obviously just a few weeks now since we struck our rates for the 2022-23 financial year. And in that context, there are a couple of legal considerations that we just need to remind ourselves of. So firstly, as part of that process, our Chief Executive, as the Chief Financial Officer, had to report on the robustness of those estimates. Basically, that means that all expenditure that we basically know that we have to incur in the year ahead was included and provided for within those estimates. And secondly, there's also a statutory requirement for us to maintain financial reserves. So there are various financial reserves such as our district fund, but also we maintain reserves for other known pressures and risks, and we did do that as part of the recent process. And we did sign off that process, members, on the 11th of February. Were able to satisfy those 2 requirements. Slide. So members, at that time in the rates process, you'll recall that we retained a COVID reserve and COVID and other financial risks reserves, and a total of 3.45 million. Members, that was retained to cover a number of risks not only associated with the pandemic, but also other global factors that were set out at the time of the rates estimates. And members, I suppose it is worth reminding, where did we get that fund from? At the start of the pandemic, we implemented a contingency plan, and also a lot of that sum came from capital expenditure that we weren't able to incur. So the proposal that we agreed as part of the rates was that that fund would be set aside in the meantime to cover risks associated with the pandemic and other global factors. And should it not be required, it would then revert back towards our capital programme, which you'll be aware that we have a number of additional things that we would like to fund in that regard. Even though the rates estimates is only a few weeks ago, there's been a number of very significant developments since that time. Some positive, some negative. So on the positive front, we're now anticipating immediate confirmation from Department for Communities that our financial losses associated with the pandemic will continue to be covered up until 31st of March 23. We don't have that confirmed yet, but we're hopeful of that before 31st of March. We also received an additional rate support grant allocation from Department for Communities, and our share of that totals 1.86 million. Against that, members, there's been a number of updates in terms of the risks that we reported at the time of the rates estimates. So firstly, whilst we did build in some money in relation to utility costs, we're now trying to conclude tender processes for utility costs and energy costs and things like that. One example is this week we haven't had any tender responses effectively to electricity and gas and insurance, so we're now entering into a negotiated procedure. The estimated pressure associated with that unbudgeted is a minimum of 800,000 for council, and that's rising as we go through each week. That will have pressures not only for the facilities that we run, but also a number of facilities that we own and our community manage that we'll need to think about addressing in due course. I think, members, it is clear that the losses that we were incurring, particularly the loss of income through the pandemic, that is continuing, in particular in relation to leisure. It's likely that that will continue well beyond the 31st of March 2023. So that's a risk which we need to bear in mind. Also, whilst we have additional rate support grant allocations, our recurrent allocation for next year has not been confirmed. So again, that's a massive risk, which we might need to use some of those additional funds to offset. We made assumptions during our rates estimates process, not only for the 22-23 pay award, but also 21-22 on the basis that wasn't yet resolved. The 21-22 pay award is in dispute, and the 22-23 pay negotiations are only commencing. Again, the money that we have in budget for those, members, subject to completion of those processes, may not be enough, and again, that will be a big recurrent pressure. We also, members, continue to have a number of service areas, including health and safety, procurement, regeneration and capital development, where we're experiencing resourcing pressures and taking forward the significance of our aspirations. And finally, members, you will be aware that whilst we have a massively ambitious capital programme in train and being delivered, we have a number of very significant additional projects that we wish to progress and deliver, which are funding dependent, and that's why at the time of the rates we agreed that any monies that weren't utilised from our COVID reserve would revert to the capital programme. Thank you.
Members, we've got a further 2 slides which outline some suggested potential immediate support the Council could consider taking, and these really are just for discussion and for consideration today. You may have other ideas that you wish to put forward. The first one is around a targeted promotion of existing support services, and that's really important because there's help out there, but not everybody knows what help is there, and they don't know how to access that support, nor might it have implications for any other support that they might be receiving through benefits. There's a range of energy efficiency programs, for example, that we feel that would be good being able to provide particular advice and support to. Members, you are aware that we currently have a budget of £112,000 for advice services. Members may consider extending these services or additional hours that will be delivered by our partner delivery organisations to assist people access all of this support. Members, you may wish to consider calling on government to intervene and lobby for changes, and we've just given some examples of those areas, such as reduction to fuel exercise duty, a deferral of the forthcoming national insurance increases, and potentially a 12-month suspension on the repayment of benefit overpayments, which would have a massive impact in terms of some people's household incomes. Members, you also may wish to consider inviting the local growth partnerships to review their priorities for their £120,000 budget, which again has already been approved by Council, and consider any immediate actions that they feel would benefit residents within their areas, obviously being so localised and so connected within their communities that they might be able to respond in terms of particular needs. And in the final slide, we've got some further suggestions for you that you might wish to consider. One is additional support for a food programme in partnership with the 3 local food banks and the Department for Community Social Supermarket programme. Again, this is something that we supported previously back under the previous hardship funding that we administered. Members, we also feel that there would be great merit in convening a meeting with regional and humanitarian charities, such as those listed, because again, they have got a range of expertise. They're also involved in different networks and support organisations, and it'd be important for us to be able to identify any gaps in terms of services or support that our local community might benefit from, and then that will put us in a position to be able to come back with any further recommendations. Members, also given the significant implications for attendance by our school children at school, we feel that there's a real opportunity to convene a meeting with local education providers, the Education Authority and the Department for Infrastructure to discuss how the cost of pupils' transport could be subsidised to ensure their attendance. You know all too well that with poor attendance that would have an impact in terms of them reaching their full potential. And also, members, given how people may be feeling very vulnerable at the minute, given their physical and mental health, we just feel that it's really important to promote the availability of local mental health advice services. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Council officers. Members, I'm going to now open it up to the floor, and just before I do that, once we get this part of business over, I'm going to go into confidential, and we're obviously going to talk about the United Union and confidential after this meeting. So members, what I'm going to do now, I see there is a number of proposals on the chat box, but I'm going to take it through members first. And as Councillor Duffy called for the special council meeting today, I'm going to give her the courtesy now of being the first member to come up, and then I will take it in order in that, and then we'll go through proposals then, members. Thank you.
Good Mayor, and thank you to the Chief Executive and to the Council officers there that presented. I think those presentations were very useful to us this afternoon in terms of looking at legally what our legal standing is in relation to council finances, but also looking at how we as a council can come up with some practical solutions as to what we can do. I did call the meeting. I called the meeting as it is. The cost of living crisis has become the biggest issue that we have been facing as a society for a very, very long time. I spoke in relation to it at the last council meeting, but even since then, I feel that the crisis is deepening and more people are feeling the absolute pain of what is going on. So in terms of us as a council area, while there isn't an awful lot that we might be able to do as a local council, I think that there is a moral responsibility on us to do what we can. And I think that that was my intention behind the meeting and asking for council officers to bring forward the practical solutions that we could do as a council. And I really do thank Una for bringing that forward. I actually took 2 photographs of your slides there, just to keep them fresh in my mind. There's nothing within those slides that I would be opposed to. I think that they're good suggestions, good starts for us as a local area in terms of what we can do. I think that we should be convening meetings where we can with the Education Authority, with our local growth partnerships, with mental health providers as well, because as you say, this is having a massive effect on people who are just feeling hopeless at the minute in terms of the meter beeping in the background and not knowing where the next loaf of bread is coming from. So if those proposals require a proposer, I am happy to make that to make those a proposal. But I do have, Mayor, my own proposal that I had sent through to the committee section prior to the meeting, because I think that while we as a council can take some practical steps ourselves, I think that there's also a wider political message that we need to get out. I see that Councillor Harkin's proposal has been put on the screen. I would just suggest that maybe my proposal should be taken first, as that hasn't been read into the minutes of the meeting. I am the first councillor to speak, and I have provided my motion in advance of the meeting as well. So if I could get some legal guidance on that, please.
Councillor Duffy, just to say, I'm going to go through all the members on the chat box, and on the chat box itself, you look at the top, Councillor Hargan's was the first proposal put on that, so that would be my first take on the business. So it would be.
Okay, well, can I propose the measures that have been put forward by council officers, or does that have to wait as well?
Councillor Duffy, there's a proposal on the floor there, and it was second on the chat box by Councillor O'Neill.
Okay, Mayor, could I suggest that due to the length of that motion, that we maybe take a minute to allow people to read it, because certainly I haven't had a chance to be able to read the detail of it. It's very lengthy.
Okay, members, if members are happy enough to look at obviously the proposal put on the table by Councillor Hargan, but as I said, next on the talk, obviously on the council officers here would be Councillor Riley, Councillor Hargan, Councillor McGoy, and Alderman McClantic. Then I have one, and then we will go to the proposal on the table. But if you sort of look at the Councillor Duffy, if you're happy to take 5 minutes now, I'm happy enough to do that. Or do you want to move on to Councillor Riley on the council officers presentation?
Yeah, Mayor, I'm happy that we continue with the discussion at this point in relation to the proposals that are the recommendations that have been made by council officers. And then maybe when we get to a proposal part of the meeting, that we take a few minutes then to allow us to consider the lengthy proposal.
No worries. Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Duffy. Councillor Riley?
Chair, thank you for that. And I suppose it's just a tactical point at the start. You know, the proposal that's up on the screen now is the first time that people have seen this in its entirety, and it is quite lengthy. So it might be appropriate that we take some time, 5 minutes, etc., just so that everybody can read it on the screen before I comment, if that's okay, Mayor. Is that your discretion, obviously?
Sorry, members, I'm going to take just 5 minutes here, okay? Okay, members. Councillor Hargan, what I'm going to do, you know, I've done this a number of occasions. I'm just looking here. It's going to take more than 5 minutes, 10 minutes for obviously everybody's throughout the district here and trying to communicate with each other now to get their heads around this. It's a major ask just to come in front of us now. But what I'm going to ask you, Councillor Hargan, could you possibly bring us now forward as a motion to the next full council meeting held on the 31st of March 2022? I'd be happy enough to accept this, but this current moment, I know we're in serious consequences at the minute and there is a crisis out there, but this is just too much to get our heads around at the minute. So that's, so Councillor Hargan, would you accept that?
No, Mayor, don't accept
I know
that.
you, I know
I
you would
think
accept
that
it,
is
but
completely,
Councillor Hargan,
completely unacceptable. We're having a meeting on the cost of living crisis. I have a motion there which you initially accepted. Now you're saying
Councillor Hargan,
we can't discuss
can I
it.
come on?
We
Councillor Hargan,
haven't seen
Councillor-
any of the
right.
motions. We haven't seen any of the
Oh.
motions. We haven't seen anything today.
Oh.
We haven't seen what the officers put
Councillor
forward.
Hargan, I'm going to ask you one more time. Listen.
I'm not accepting this, and I don't think anyone should accept it. This is a
Thank you. Okay, members, moving on now. Councillor Riley, do you want to come on now? Over.
Yeah, Mayor, thanks for bringing me in, and I appreciate that that a motion was put on the screen there, but it was the first time that people had seen it. You know, I appreciate as well that we are in a cost of living crisis, and in fact, it's gone beyond a crisis. It is an emergency, as we know. We have seen places in our city and district run out of fuel that normally do not run out of fuel, as people are trying to get in ahead of price rises. We have seen people order oil only for those deliveries not to arrive because the price of oil has skyrocketed on an hourly basis, not just on a daily or weekly basis. So it is clearly an emergency, and that's why our party has raised this both in the Assembly in terms of trying to deal with emergency legislation going through, given the fact that we don't have a fully functioning executive at the moment. We also have raised this in Westminster in terms of Foyle MP Colm Eastwood trying to get the clerks in Westminster to try and get to explore what options are open to compel the British government to assist with curbing this crisis. So we need to do all that we can in all the legislative bodies that we are in as elected representatives to try and help people who are struggling here. And that's where the SDLP are approaching this. We have, you know, the opportunities to hear from Alfie and to Una here this afternoon, and I welcome the work that they've done, you know, and the slides that they've presented to us here today. I know that that Councillor Duffy has indicated she was happy to support the recommendations that were coming from officers. We're happy to second those and to work on the basis of ensuring that the council does all that it legally can to assist people at this stage. And we have, as a council, been very proactive in the past. Before this immediate crisis and emergency that we're in right now, we did allocate monies into a hardship fund last year, and through the elected members working group that was set up to deal with that, we're proactively trying to see what assistance we could give to people directly as a council, but working in partnership with other statutory agencies to try and give them the support that people are crying out for at this stage. So, Mayor, thank you for allowing me in, and thanks, as I said, to the officers for the report. And we're happy to second Councillor Duffy's proposal today to take forward the recommendations outlined on the screen earlier in the slides. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Riley. Councillor Hargan, I'm going to bring you on now. You indicated on the chat box on the officers' presentation.
There is no doubt that we are in an unprecedented situation right now, and I think that it's an absolute disgrace that the executive parties were unable to come to an agreement to utilise the £300 million that should be getting utilised right now to help people across our communities who are basically being pushed into destitution. It's also a disgrace that the executive parties refused to declare a hardship emergency months ago, where they had the opportunity, and then put financial assistance in line with the scale of the crisis to help people. And we have no problem endorsing the council officers' recommendations. But let's face it, those are not recommendations that are going to help people right now. And we need to take unprecedented radical action. We are calling this meeting because people across this district are crying out for help. And it's not going to be good enough for us to turn around and say we're going to organise some meetings with people that are going to take months. That is not radical action. This is not going to help people right now who cannot afford to pay their bills. And we've been contacted by many people, many organisations saying they do not know what to do. So it's just not going to be good enough right now. to try and shut down the proposal that we are bringing forward as People Before Profit, that has support from lots of people, and that people seen weeks ago, because we talked about the £3 million that we have in reserve being put and utilised for to help people. So we haven't seen any proposals today. We haven't seen the officer's proposal. We haven't seen a Sinn Féin proposal, and now we're being told, because nobody's seen the People Before Profit proposal, it can't be discussed, it can't be debated, and it can't be voted upon. So we are calling again, Mayor, and we're calling on all members in this chamber to insist that that proposal that we put forward, that many people will agree with, that includes discussion about utilising £3 million that we have as COVID reserves for a rainy day, that is not spent and is not tied up, that we discuss that today. We have to do two prongs. We have to continue to campaign with Westminster to reverse these increase in taxes that is going to disproportionately impact working class people. We have to call on the Stormont executive parties to find a way to utilise the £300 million. We have to call for an expansion of the existing energy payment scheme to support more people. There's lots of mechanisms we can campaign as a council for action, and that's what we have to be doing right now. We cannot be sitting here pretending there's not a crisis outside, and then we have to do everything we can to help the residents in our district. That is our duty, and we should be discussing how we can help people right now. And that means if we have to do things that are unprecedented, so be it, because that's the scale of the crisis. This is a humanitarian crisis in our district. And I want to just say, look, there's been a fantastic response across our district to refugees fleeing from Ukraine. We need the same unprecedented action in our district to help people, mostly the least well-off workers and vulnerable people across our societies and organisations that are struggling because they cannot pay the bills that are getting hit with right now. We have to help people, and shutting down discussion on this proposal or trying to push it off down the line to block it is an injustice, and it will not be acceptable. We are not going to accept this proposal not being discussed today, and then other proposals that nobody has seen being discussed. And this is why people in larger numbers are now taking to the streets in the cost of living protest. This is why workers are going on strike.
Sorry,
it's because
member,
of
could you bring your
inaction.
remarks
It's
to a close,
inaction
please?
by government, and we need to as a council advocate for our workers and our least well-off people. And that's why we're demanding that proposal that we brought to the council get discussed today.
Thank you, Councillor Hargan. Councillor McGowan.
Thank you, Mayor. I think, like everybody in this meeting today, we've all come here today to hear what we can do to mitigate some of the issues that people are having. The cost of living crisis, it's worth remembering, people just hasn't come around because of Ukraine. It's been a combination of events which started with some parties backing and supporting Brexit. And we know that was the initial increase in prices at food and fuel and everything else. And then we had global logistics, we've had an energy surge, and now we've the war in Ukraine. I was interested to speak to Alfie because I'm not really standing for election, so I'm not going to make any speeches, but I'm more interested in what we can actually do in this council to mitigate the 65,000 families in this district that pay rates. And Alfie put up a set of slides there today, and we keep bandying around this 3 million. So my question really is to ask Alfie or John Kilby, are we allowed to spend that 3 million? Is there 3 million? And I know I just read Councillor Hargan has a motion on there, and I'm not refusing to discuss anything. It's a lot of statements made about lots of different things. But one of the things that I picked up on there was the inflationary increase. We should be aware that if we do ask for an inflationary increase for all council workers, that will cost £2 million. That means we don't have a reserve. So I came here today, I think all of us came here today to see if there was anything we could do to help the people out there. Because I'm trying to help families like everyone else. I'm getting the same calls. All of us are getting the same calls. So I would like to ask Alfie, are we able to do that? Because I know from looking at the rates, and I spent a lot of time with Alfie and a lot of time since then, there's pressures on that 3 million he outlined today. Are we legally allowed to do what's in that motion? If we do that, does it mean job losses? Does it mean we cancel events? Does it mean we have to lay workers off? Because I'm not going to vote for something if it means we're laying workers off. So I'd like Alfie to come back in and say, if we were they vote to put 3 million, what does it mean for the council? Does it mean we have to shut down some things? Or is it 3 million? Because they hinted at other pressures, so that is why I put on in the box. We it's okay to discuss whatever motion people want to put forward, but what latitude do we have?
Okay, thank you. Councillor McGuinness, bring your remarks to a close, please.
Finish, Mayor, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to bring John in here.
Thanks, Mayor. Members, we can really only answer that question generally today. I mean, members are always at liberty to consider the type of initiatives within the boundaries of our legal varies. They're always at liberty to consider what it wishes to spend money on, to either in terms of service delivery or in terms of the pressures that our citizens experience at any given time. However, it must do so in consideration of the totality of the pressures that are on the organisation and the totality of the implications that such expenditure might have. And those are the boundaries within which members need to take decisions on the basis of what the implications are, the affordability of those decisions, or indeed where that money might come from. And I think through the rates estimates process, and again reinforced in the slides today, we've outlined the sort of pressures that the organisation faces. So really the only answer that officers can provide today, members, is that you are at liberty to discuss expenditure, but it must be in consideration and detailed consideration of all of the associated implications that may spring from those discussions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for that, John. Moving on, members, Alderman McClintock.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting me in. And I suppose there's none of us in dispute today that there are massive issues facing people at this time. And I think that the worrying thing is for so many, it is the first time they never thought they would find themselves in a position that they're in, particularly those who are in employment and in low employment. But today, Mayor, is not the time for political grandstanding. I think we're here to try and see what we can practically do to help people. And I know it's been proposed and seconded that we accept the recommendations from the officers, and I'm completely on behalf of the DUP saying that we are happy with those. They encompass a number of things that we would ourselves be very keen on, and even today, I mean, our party leader and also the chair of the Infrastructure Committee and the Unanimous Committee have written to Her Majesty's Government to ask about the fuel tax and the duties, because it's actions like those that will make a difference right across the board to people, because we have an unprecedented obviously fuel and energy and transport costs. Transport was already up 27% costs. There have been suggestions made that some of the costs are because of Brexit. I can tell you that people I know in Donegal and in the south of Ireland are experiencing the same problems as we are here. So being in the EU or out of the EU, I don't think is the issue here. What we do need to do is to push Westminster. The Westminster government are key to this. They have got to find a way, as we have requested certainly as a party, but they have got to find a way of making the cuts to the duty, as the Republic of Ireland has already done at this moment in time. I think that there are other things that the Westminster government could do, and that is the national insurance contributions that were to rise. I think things like that have to be dealt with as well. And I think we have to be practical about where issues can be resolved. Westminster, I think, is where most of them are resolved. Yes, Stormont has a major part to play in this as well. And my understanding is that this £300 million that has been talked about, obviously in Stormont, it's outside of the budget. £150 million of that has got to be repaid. But ways can be found around these things. If there is a will to do it, it can be done. And that may be through rates or other ways. I'm glad, Mayor, that you have said that the motion that Councillor Harkin put before us should be deferred, because it's one of those situations, because these big lengthy motions, there are some good parts in it, but there are other parts that absolutely are not something that we would be likely to support, even whenever we read through this and have time to work on it. We have competing demands within this council. We have 1,000 workers. We have workers who are looking for pay rises. We have workers who we do not want to lose their jobs. We have pressures upon us, and we cannot just bankrupt this council because people before profit have no prudency at all to what council need to keep in reserve or to have there for emergency. And yes, this is an emergency. It's an emergency of unprecedented scale within our council, but we still have to be prudent. We still have the duty to look at all of these things. So, Mayor, happy on behalf of the DUP to agree with the recommendations within the officer's report, and particularly putting pressure on Westminster. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Atlantic. Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, this meeting gives me a bit of concern as to the way the meeting has been carried out, the way that certain parties have come in, the way that, and it's quite right, people can and parties can call a special meeting, and that's what that is. And the agenda was set at that special meeting as a discussion to the cost of living crisis, and that was it. We didn't get any papers with it. We got an agenda for a special meeting, and I think it's what's happened here has gone away past protocol that's been set in this council for the last 8 years. This is very complex issues, and there's people coming in here and they're electioneering and they're jumping around and blaming this and blaming that and blaming Brexit. There was poverty in this city and district way before we even heard of Brexit. And when you hear people coming that are millionaires talking about poverty, it goes above and beyond. But we had a motion, a proposal that was done within the chat box, as per usual, has been getting kicked back. And then there's other proposals allowed to be set on the floor. We've had, and I've had in this council, and it's all due respect to officers, had severe trouble trying to get a letter wrote. But we had someone call for a meeting, and then officers pre-prepared possible proposals. Now, I don't disagree with the proposals at all, but I think that what it should have happened is it goes in, and let's call it an emergency meeting and get round the table and thrash it out, not kicking back proposals or accepting others over the top of it, because I think the protocol has gone way outside, and certain parties have been given certain privileges over others in this chamber. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. They're not proposals, they're suggestions. And just to confirm one, this meeting was called today. It was a special council meeting called today to allow us to discuss the cost of living crisis facing the city and district, and have council officers present present practical measures front of the members on the possible take that council could take. We're working with our community and statutory partners to assist residents during these extreme times. And as far as I'm aware as mayor, that's what we're doing. Going back, we're going to bring it up on Councillor Hargan's suggestion is very lengthy. I find it does take quite a long time for us to process that. We have to be very careful. As a councillor, I haven't done it as my term as mayor, and I won't be doing it now, getting ourselves into very difficult situations. But I'm happy enough, as I said to Councillor Hargan, to bring it forward to the next full council meeting on the 31st of March, and I'm happy to take that. And I'm sure every member on here will have the time to go through that suggestion word by word and take it on. So thank you for that, Councillor Gallagher. Okay, members, moving on. I have Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Mayor. And there's no one will dispute that there is an immediacy of the emergency situation that all of our citizens, whether employed or not, find themselves in. And solutions will be short-term, medium-term and long-term. And we've got to be mindful of that. Can I thank the officers for the presentations that we've had? It gives some indication of what might be possible for this council to actually undertake. Alfie mentioned that the COVID reserve or the reserves could be released when they're not needed. So I suppose the first point would be, is there any indication when we would know that certain elements of the reserve were not needed and could be released? And I think we all have to accept that we have a corporate responsibility to our own internal finances and to ensure that our council is operating in a financially appropriate manner. Mention has been made of forthcoming pressures, and it has been named there with regard to pay negotiations. And you know, are those pay negotiations within our remit? You know, so do we know what the potential is there? Within the suggestions from Una, and I thank officers for the suggestions, the issue of the various groups, support services within the council area was brought up, those existing ones. And one of the issues that I sometimes find, particularly beyond the urban area, is access to those sorts of advice services. So perhaps something that could be considered by council is to bring together all of those various groups that have been named to coordinate some sort of a roadshow to go around the various communities and bring those advice services out to the community. As I say, sometimes those tend to be urban based and it's a difficult situation for the rural communities. So that's something that might be considered by officers to coordinate that. With regard to the food banks, as mentioned, there are 3 food banks, but then we have the DFI food programme throughout the 8 local community growth partnership board areas, and declaring interest obviously as a member of the Derg one. But I'm assuming that is what is being referred to in the officer's presentation, is the 3 food banks and the situation being developed within the 8 growth partnership boards. Mention was made, well, you know, another one was energy efficiency programs. You know, that doesn't happen overnight. You know, so we've got to be aware that there will be medium and long-term solutions that will occur, but those that are short-term and can be enacted, we should be enacting at the earliest. And I'm prepared to support Councillor Duffy's proposal that we accept the recommendations, but that we prioritise, and what we can do in short term we get done. Councillor McGowan did mention Brexit there. I don't think Brexit is the problem. I think it's the protocol implications which have been forced upon the United Kingdom internally, interfering with the internal workings of a national government from Europe, but that's another point. Mayor, thank you for allowing me in. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Alderman Hussey. Alderman Hussey, I'm going to bring Alfie here now. Alfie?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Alderman Hussey. I suppose the question is, when do we know when certain elements of that reserve can be released? And I think the short answer is it's difficult to know when. There's various risks facing us. If we look, for example, at one risk, which is the loss of income associated with leisure, I think the answer to that is we won't know that until probably the 23-24 financial year. I wish it was sooner, but that's likely to be the position. In relation to utility costs and energy costs, those are changing on a weekly basis. Again, you would hope sooner rather than later they would stabilise, but we just don't know that. In relation to pay, the 21-22 position, I think, is subject to a discussion later. But in relation to 22-23, those negotiations are only commencing. We know it took literally until the last couple of weeks to reach a resolution for the 21-22 financial year, so it's likely to take, it could take a similar amount of time. So, unfortunately, it's a very uncertain position to be in from a financial perspective. I wish we could answer all those questions sooner rather than later, but that's unfortunately the uncertainties that we face at the minute. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Fred Alderman. I'll say thank you, Fred Alfie. Members, Councillor Gallagher on the proposal. There is no proposal on the table, but Councillor Gallagher, or Donnelly, sorry, I'll give you a courtesy. Do you want to come on?
I do, Chair, but I think Councillor Barr was before me there. Am I right?
Oh, yes, you are right. Apologies, Councillor Barr. Councillor Barr.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you,
Apologies.
Gary. In the short time I had to look at Councillor Harkin's proposed motion there, I've seen a few things I agree with and possibly a couple of things I might not agree with, but I agree there should have been a hardship emergency declared long ago. If there is 300 million available, the executive in way should be found to use it to mitigate the negative effect this cost of living crisis is having on the poor and the working poor, and councils should be advocating for the use of that money. The energy payment support scheme is selective and discriminatory and falls way short of what is needed. If the 3 million of reserve COVID savings is there to be used in an emergency, well, we're in an emergency, and again, that money should be used. This is not rocket science, it's about prioritising, and the immediate priority we're faced with is an unprecedented cost of living crisis, which is going to impact on people's mental and physical health negatively. Poverty in the Derry City and Span area was a problem before the current crisis. The current cost of living increases only exacerbate a major problem which was already there. In terms of the slides which suggest a potential immediate support, they're all very good. They're all very good in theory, but they're without guarantee. And finally, I'd just like to go on record and say I feel it's totally unacceptable to ask Councillor Harkin to defer his motion to a council meeting, which is over 2 weeks away. We're in a crisis which needs immediate attention, and I feel it's unreasonable and undemocratic not to deal with this motion today. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Fred. Councillor Donnelly.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, look, I listen to Alfie here and appreciate Alfie's work, but there's a lot of could have, maybe, if, whatever. I think it was described as an uncertain position. That may be the case, but Chair, I'll tell you what is certain is that people are suffering at this minute as we're on here talking, and people want action. They don't want rhetoric. You know, and what I'm seeing is rhetoric with no substance. Regards to people before profit proposal, it should, in my opinion, be put forward. That's our job. That's why we're here. That's what we should be talking about. People are hurting at the minute. You know, let's discuss it. We should be discussing it. But what you have allowed is that you have allowed individual councillors to pick pieces of it and pick it apart. You know, and agree with Councillor Gallagher. You know, we have a very wealthy businessman, landlord talking about poverty. You wouldn't know what poverty is in places like Cragen.
A point of order there. That is undemocratic behaviour there in terms of calling out a councillor who is in the virtual chamber. That's
not a point of order.
It's uncomradely.
That's not a point of order.
Start with, Councillor Donnelly.
Not a point of order.
Order, members.
It's not a point of order.
Members.
And Chair, what we're seeing here, we're seeing people here suffering, whilst these people talking rhetoric, and all I can see here today is you know, this meeting, it's a pre-election box ticking exercise, rhetoric, no substance. And you know, this council in the past and a lot of the stuff it has done, whilst maybe well-meaning, it was completely ineffective for a lot of people on the ground. a lot of people were discriminated against, and I say that word deliberately. They didn't get people who needed the help and support didn't get it because of an ineffective system. And I can understand the growing resentment of politicians by working class people. And you see, if people are watching this meeting today, that can only grow. That can only grow because when people talk about fiddling while Rome burns, the price of coal is to go up apparently 30% on Monday. So people who can't afford gas or oil, who have turned now to coal, are seeing the unacceptable face of capitalism putting another increase. And again, it's people at the bottom of the pile that are going to suffer. And unfortunately, the message coming from this meeting today is that politicians don't care. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dolly. Councillor Doyle.
Mayor, as expected, this meeting is an absolute farce. The reason why this meeting was requested today wasn't because major parties were choked up because of the rising cost of fuel, in particular for people. It's because it has shown them to be absolutely ineffectual. It has shown them to be uncaring, and it has shown that when it comes down to it, the only thing this meeting serves is so that some people on this call, when they go knocking doors in the next couple of weeks, can say, we called a meeting about it. Now, in the last couple of weeks, I've been involved in helping people out with some heating. And the stories that have come to me from people all around this town would break your heart. I have seen the whites of the eyes of the people that we are supposed to be serving. And this meeting was never going to do anything that would help someone out who was sitting in a freezing house today. Now, whenever I see, the politicking that's going on here, there's two things that really has got my goat. One is Sinn Féin's attitude of, let's hold a meeting because it'll look good. You couldn't even coordinate in the last 2 weeks between the leadership in the north and the leadership in the south. Michelle O'Neill saying that this 55 million scheme for £200, which is no good to anybody now, was great, while Mary Lou McDonald in Dublin said a scheme almost 10 times that wouldn't touch the sides. And then we have the SDLP. I had to laugh at some of the stuff that's been coming out from them. Let's see if we can have emergency legislation. Sorry, but your MLAs knew about this from August. The Speaker of the Assembly wrote a letter to all MLAs weeks ago saying that there would be no more private members' legislation. Did they open their mouths? No, it's just a stunt. And you see, I have to say, Mayor, and I don't mean this in any personal way, but your decision not to bring forward and let us hear from the People Before Profit motion was wrong. And as for prudence and everything else that has been mentioned here today, I would quite gladly sell this council's family silver if I thought that someone in my district or another part of the city could have a fire on for the night. People genuinely ask yourselves what it is you're sitting in this council for, because you're absolutely useless to anybody that actually needs anything.
Thank you for that, Councillor Doyle. 2 seconds. Members. Councillor Duffy.
Mayor, this meeting has descended into a bit of electioneering from quite a number of people who are accusing other people of doing just that. But I have to get back to where we're at. I called this meeting on the back of unprecedented rises in fuel, in energy, in food, and everything else that people have been facing across this city and district. And I don't need to take lectures from anyone in terms of the whites of eyes of people, because I see them myself. I don't need anybody to tell me about them. I hear them on the end of the phone. I be at their doors. I be in their houses. So I see it myself. I don't need that coming from anybody else. I would just like to put on record a number of facts here from some of the stuff that has been churning around. In terms of the 300 million and the budget, it's not a failure of all parties. there was a party leader meeting yesterday where all parties bar one agreed on the way forward. The way forward is for the DUP to re-nominate a First Minister, to allow the executive to take that decision. That's as simple as that. All other legal avenues have been explored and are not available. So that is the solution at this point in terms of getting that 300 million out and getting an agreement on the budget. In terms of the motion here by Councillor Harkin that we're not discussing, but I just want to put on record, it is a significant motion. It is a significant, there's significant asks throughout it. There's bits of it that I absolutely agree with and would 100% support, but there's other bits of it that need further examination and further detail. And John, you have outlined them yourself in terms of, there is uncertainty. There are, Alpha, you had said in your presentation that there's a legal requirement to hold reserves and to be in a sound financial footing. If we spend our reserves, where does that leave us? Now, does that mean that we will see job losses within the council? Does that mean that we will see services closed? Does that mean we will have to cancel events? Will we have to close our leisure services? And one of the most important things to me is the job losses element of it, because we are seeing in council unprecedented rises in costs as well. So I have all those concerns. And Councillor Harkin, I would say this to you: if you were serious about bringing that proposal, you could have shared it with people prior to the meeting, and you have done that before. And I would have quite happily have gone through it and looked at it and been able to formulate amendments or whatever coming forward from it. So I just want to put that on record. But we have come to this meeting with a genuine attitude in terms of trying to find practical solutions for our residents, people that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and what we practically as a council can do for them. And I think that those proposals have come through, or those recommendations have come through from council officers, which have already been put on record. I would just want to put this on record as well. Councillor McGowan came into this council a number of months back. At each meeting since then, there has been a personal comment in relation to him. I would ask that the city solicitor look at that and see if there is anything that we can do, because that is bullying and that is abuse. And I want to put that on record as well. Just moving on then, I did provide a proposal to the committee section prior to the meeting, and I just wondering if that can be shared.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. That's been noted. Okay, members, I'm going to bring this part of the meeting to a close. I have one more speaker here, and sorry, 2 seconds. I see a number of speakers. Sorry, members, 2 seconds just to look at this. Okay, Councillor Duffy, I'm just looking at this. I'm going to stay consistent. There's more than asked. What I'm going to ask here is if this could be brought forward to the next full council meeting. Thank you.
Mayor, in the vein of consistency, I'll accept.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. I look forward to seeing that as a motion brought forward. Okay, members, moving on. Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm struggling to understand the point of this emergency meeting now. If it's just going to be a talking shop, rather than us actually being able to do something. Like
Councillor
there's
O'Neill, do you want me to read out, if you look at the email sent out by Councillor Duffy, I'm looking to call a special council meeting allowing us to discuss the living crisis, which we're doing, faces the city and district, and have council officers present a practical measures and the way possible to take forward for working for our community and our statutory partners to assist us during this extreme measures.
Chair,
Go ahead there, Councillor O'Neill.
with all due respect, that's not on the agenda that I was sent.
Well,
Look at the
go ahead there, Councillor O'Neill, go ahead.
and there's an official.
Well,
Sorry, Councillor, go ahead, Councillor O'Neill.
I think we're all able to, look at these motions, and particularly with Councillor Harkin's motion about the 3 million reserve fund, like that was sent out a few weeks ago at the full council meeting. Like Councillor Harkin has shortened the motion to just include that, so we can properly look at that and discuss that. People know that this was going to come up, and I'm sure people have discussed it among themselves. And it's really, really important, because all I'm hearing is Stormont, Westminster, and yes, definitely this crisis has been caused by their ineffectiveness and inaction, and their commitment to poverty rather than actually challenging the things which cause poverty in our society. But what we're here to do today is actually do something about it. Council definitely has limited powers at time, but right now we have a reserve fund that's meant for a crisis situation. The crisis situation is the people in our city and district who are dying, who are struggling, and who really have nothing left. And they're watching this meeting here, and they're not being filled with hope at all. That our council has the courage to actually use that money to serve the people directly in this emergency crisis, because that's what it is. I really do think we should be looking at these motions, we should be discussing these motions, and we should be doing something rather than just talking here. Particularly we need to really discuss that 3 million reserve fund and actually progress action on this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. They're not motions. These are suggestions put forward by members, and we will be looking over them when these members bring it forward to full council, the next full council meeting. So, okay, thank you. Moving on, members, Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mayor, I'm exasperated about this meeting. I mean, I honestly thought we were going to come here, and I have to give thanks to the council officers for coming up with recommendations. They really have done their best to try and figure out ways and means forward, and being part of the last hardship fund working group and seeing the difficulties it was to try and get that money out in the ground. But it was money that was needed. I really thought that we could try and put everything aside today and actually figure out a way forward. I spent all day yesterday ringing around trying to find some sort of help for a number of family members, and I spoke to a fellow councillor too about it, and everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's trying to find a solution on the ground. Mayor, I'm not even going to talk about the rest. It is just politicking when politicking isn't needed. I am going to ask Mayor whether or not I propose a meeting of the poverty working group with Alfie to identify any potential funds that we would be able to use as a hardship fund. I don't know if that's possible or if there is, but I would like to have a meeting with that working group and Alfie to look at what we can do and what we are, because part of that hardship working group was that to look at potential ways and keeping that going in future years, because we knew this was going to be a problem. We knew this was going to need council support over the next coming years. So I don't know if that's within your remit today, Mayor, but I'm going to put that to the floor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ferguson. There is a meeting with instead of bringing this up a proposal, just to let members know, there is a meeting of this going to be happening. So there is, instead of us going through a proposal. Are you happy enough with that, Councillor Ferguson?
Mayor, as long as we can have Alfie there to go through any kind
Alfie will be Alfie will be there, yeah.
Well, I'm happy enough for that, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ferguson. Alderman Devaney.
Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me in. And look, my colleague has spoken earlier on, and we do not underestimate the challenges that the people are having out there at the minute with the cost of living. And, you know, as one of the previous speakers said, we talked about Brexit. You know, I have families and businesses who have businesses in Donegal and in the Republic of Cross and the Republic of Ireland, and they're suffering the very, very same. So we can't put it all down to Brexit. And, you know, back to Sinn Féin, who have said that we need to nominate a First Minister again. Just remind Sinn Féin that they collapsed the Assembly for well over around 3 years over an Irish Language Act. So, you know, sometimes people who live in greenhouses shouldn't be throwing stones, just to remind them that for 3 years. And we're not that long collapsed at the minute, but, you know, at the end of the day, Sinn Féin should be focusing on solutions. They told us that, you know, that we couldn't distribute the stadia funding, and they told us that we couldn't pass legislation or even an apology on the HIA. And, you know, that has all went through. So there is a lot of work going through there. And I think Sinn Féin have to step up to the plate and acknowledge that. And once again, Chair, there are some people here who are probably prepared to bankrupt the council. And yes, there is a reserve there. And those reserves, I think Alfie has alluded to, what if and what may happen if things go wrong. We have salary, we pay rises to deal with. And, you know, if that 3 million was to disappear, and, you know, the next thing happens, something happens that we have to lay off staff, and we're exacerbating the situation by laying off staff. And then a worse crisis could be, Mayor, that we have to cut services. You know, imagine the cry if we hadn't our bins to go out in the morning, if we left our bins out in the morning and we had no service to lift them. You know, that is a crisis as well. But, Mayor, I just want to put on record that Sinn Féin shouldn't be throwing stones when they live in a greenhouse, when they collapsed the Assembly for over 3 years. And look, they have short memories. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Riley.
Yep, thanks, Mayor. And I suppose you know, there's a couple of points I want to make in relation to what's been said. First of all, you know, all of us got the same notice of summons of meetings to come along here to the virtual chamber. We came prepared to debate and to discuss things. You know, so although Councillor Harkin's motion was only put in the chat box today, we do know that he had tried to table it in the past. We know from media outlets that the general substance of what he was looking to bring forward. So the SDLP would have been happy to debate it here this afternoon and to interrogate it and to go through that process. You know, and I think in the absence of being allowed to table motions today, it does really call into question as to what's the actual point of today's meeting, because certainly people out there watching this live will be wondering what is the council doing, and why are they not able to hear motions and to hear proposals coming forward. As I said in my earlier remarks, our party has taken action in the Assembly, in Westminster, and indeed here in local government to try and to alleviate the pressures that are on people. And Mayor, in relation to Councillor Doyle, who seemed to have an opportunity to attack parties and specifically our party in relation to what we've been doing, it's escaped his memory that back last year, Sinead McLaughlin MLA was out calling for the executive to, as she's chair of the Stormont Executive Office, to deal with this, to bring forward energy plans, and we produced our own energy paper last year. That was before there was a war in Ukraine, and that was before the First Minister resigned, leaving us with no executive. So the SDLP are trying to find solutions here. We're not attacking other parties. We're not focusing on political point scoring. We're trying to make a difference to the people that we represent. So Councillor Doyle, instead of focusing on logs, maybe he could log on to a council rates meeting and vote against rises that people will face on their annual district rates. So Mayor,
is your MP and your MLAs going to take their pay rise? How are they going to explain that to people?
Members,
So,
Order.
Mayor, I think that.
Councillor Riley, could you bring your remarks to a close there,
Yes,
please?
Mayor, I will indeed, and I think that outburst by Councillor Doyle shows exactly
Councillor
what
Riley,
about.
could you bring your remarks to a
He just wants to
close,
shout
please?
at people as opposed to deal with solutions.
Thank you, Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, members, moving on. Final speaker, Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mayor. And Mayor, I think I'm going to agree with some of the previous speakers. They say that this has descended into a farce, and it's really disappointing because it's an issue that's affecting absolutely everybody, and that there's so many people within our council area that are in a state of desperation at the minute. They're looking for answers, and I don't think that they're going to find too many by listening to what's going on here. But I want to go back to the officer's presentation, and during the officer's presentation, there was reference to the Salvation Army and St. Vincent de Paul, and how they've had unprecedented demand on their services. And I've no doubt that that's the case. It's the same. Every single one of us as members are dealing with cases and dealing with people that are in dire need on a daily basis. But there's another group that wasn't referenced that has been supporting people for quite some time, and that group is Cornerstone Church, and they have set up. They've a Hope Centre that's situated in Duke Street in the Waterside, and I know some of the work and the support that they're providing people is fantastic. And Mayor, I know you're not inclined to take proposals at this meeting, but again, it is a suggestion. I think it would be good if not only Cornerstone Church and representatives from the Hope Centre, but representatives from the Salvation Army and St. Vincent de Paul, if appropriate, if there was an opportunity that they could present their relevant committee, I think it would be a way for council to show our support and give them an opportunity. So and a way as way of recognition of the support that they're providing the citizens of our district. So I'm going to make a suggestion that that we extend an invitation to those named organisations. They make a presentation to the relevant committee. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Deputy Mayor, that's been noted, so it has, and that's been noted by officers. Okay, members. Unfortunately, the meeting has went longer than we thought, and obviously this is a very important issue. It's heartbreaking. Members, we wouldn't be on this job right there. They look after people, they represent people, care for people. It is a crisis at the minute. And the thing about it, you all know the way it's been going with these pop-ups, I call them. I'm happy enough to take these in the next full council meeting. They are important, but they're too much to bring at me. I understand too, there's elections coming up, members. So do I. But we're all here for one purpose. It's for the citizens of the city and district to make it better, and we'll do our best. So I look forward to the members that brought forward the proposals here, and to bring it forward as a motion to full council, and we'll discuss it and have it out then. It gives everybody the courtesy to look over them properly. So thank you, members, for today's meeting. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, members, for today's meeting. I'm going to go now into confidential to discuss. For what? Members, could I have a proposer and a seconder to go into confidential?
I propose that we not go into confidential. This meeting should not be ended right now. And I propose that we take my suggestion, which is the reduced motion, which everybody's been discussing anyway, and already had prior notice of. So I propose that we discuss it as a suggestion. Other people says they're prepared to come to this meeting, they actually discuss it. So that should happen now, Mayor. And I appeal to you on the basis of what you just said, that we are in a crisis. This is an emergency situation, and we can't be dilly-dallying and delaying these discussions and pushing them down the line. It's disgraceful. If we do that, it's disgraceful to the people who are looking to us for help right now. So that's a proposal not to go into confidential, and to continue this discussion and to take my suggested discussion that's in the my suggestion that's in the chat box.
Okay, members, I've ruled on a motion to go into confidential. Is there a proposer seconder?
Is there already not a proposal on the floor not to go into? That is seconded.
Mayor, can I ask for some clarification? You stated there that this meeting has went on longer than expected. How long did you expect a meeting about a crisis to go on for? Can I get some clarification of that, please?
Members, give us 2 minutes here. Okay, sorry, members. Members, appreciate the timer. Members, looking at the proposal on the table again, it's similar to the first proposal came forward. And what I'm going to ask is Councillor Hargan bring us forward to the next full council meeting on the 31st of March. And what I'm looking for, I have put a proposal on the table now to go into confidential, and I'm asking for a seconder, members. That is the proposal now on the floor.
I'll second, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman.
Mayor, I proposal in not to go into confidential. I got a second for that. Can we go to legal now? Because I believe that this would need to go.
Councillor Hargan, I was on first, so I was on that. I proposed to go into confidential. Members, we are now moving on to confidential.
Mayor, I'd like to call a vote on
A
that.
vote on it, yes. A vote to see who wants to go into confidential, Mayor.
Chair, is it not the case that Councillor Harkin's proposal was seconded and it was properly put before the floor, where yours didn't get a seconder?
Mayor, my understanding was that you called for a proposer to go into confidentiality, not that you proposed it.
Okay, members, what I'm going to do here, there's a bit of confusion on the thing. I'm going to bring in the Chief Executive.
Mayor, thank you. Mayor, I'm not actually sure whether you proposed or not and was seconded or not. So we would need to really trawl back through the minutes to find out who proposed what first. But the essence of the matter is, do members wish to go into confidential or not to discuss the staffing issue that's before us at the moment? And if you forgive me, members, we just can't ascertain whether without actually going back over a written record, whether the mayor did come in first, but I'm not sure that he was seconded, and then obviously Councillor Harkin came in and it was seconded. But maybe you just want to consider whether you do or do not wish to go into confidential to discuss the staffing issue. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor, it's my understanding, even if your proposal was first and was seconded, that we would still have to take a vote.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, Councillor Harkin. That's correct, Mayor. You do still have to take a vote.
Mayor, could I just clarify point?
Where, Councillor Riley?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. It's just to, in relation to the vote that may be coming, is this a vote to not go into confidential so we can continue the discussion on cost of living emergency? Or is it that we take the staffing item and deal with it in open business? Because I think they're two very different things. So just some clarity on what people are asked to vote on. Thank you.
Point of order, Mayor.
That was me the same, Mayor.
Point of order, Mayor.
Councillor Doyle.
Under standing item, standing order 16J, I'm proposing that the question now be put.
What's the question?
That we go to a vote on the proposal not to go into confidential business.
Councillor Riley, Councillor Ferguson, go ahead.
Mayor, just again, the clarification of whether we are voting not to go into confidential to continue talking about the cost of living crisis or go into confidential and talk about the staffing issue, because at this moment I don't know what we're voting for, so I couldn't vote unless.
Bring in John here to explain, members.
Members, you'll have to forgive me. This is rather difficult given that it is virtual and there are cross proposals here arriving at the same time. But as I understand it, the mayor initially asked for a proposal to go into confidential to talk about the staffing issue. He had indicated earlier in the meeting that once members had concluded the open business discussion, that he would seek a proposal to go into confidential business to talk about the staffing issue. As I said earlier, members, I think Councillor Harkin then came in to say not to go into confidential, and that was seconded. So my suggestion, and then Councillor Doyle has called for a vote to be taken. So it isn't 100% clear at this moment in time on what is being called for. If you allow us, members, I think it would be beneficial if the mayor was simply to outline what his proposal is again and precisely what his proposal is for, and then if members want to take a vote on that, that would seek and give the meeting some clarity. So if members will allow that to happen, it might bring some clarity to the meeting if the mayor was to propose what he had originally intended. And then, of course, should members not wish to do that, the vote can then be taken.
John, can I ask you a quick question?
You can, Councillor Doyle, of course.
Yeah, under Standing Order 16.2, I can move the motion that I moved without notice. I've done that. Surely now what should be happening is we should be taking a vote on Councillor Harkin's proposal. It was already seconded.
But Councillor Doyle, that was that the question be put, and with respect, Councillor Doyle, there is confusion as to which question we're talking about. At the moment, just before you came in there, I said there was confusion between whether the Mayor's proposal was on the floor or Councillor Harkin's proposal was on the floor. And the suggestion simply was that the Mayor puts a proposal again on the floor and members vote one way or the other. The same will hopefully take place, whichever members want to do, either stay in open business or go into confidential business. But I think the confusion has arisen as to what members are voting for. So I understand entirely, Councillor Doyle, but I think the question being put, there was members have said, what is the question? So I think the chair, the best resolution to this would be that the chair would make a proposal and members can then vote one way or the other and take forward a subsequent proposal, should that be the case.
John, surely if I move the motion, I know what it is that I'm moving the motion on. Now, I'm happy to clarify for members right now what I am moved the motion on, but the motion that I put forward is under Standing Order 16.2J. It should be heard without notice. That's why I raised it. And the proposal is that the question now be put. The question being Councillor Harkin's proposal to not go into confidential business, which I seconded. So for me, as far as I can see it, unless Philip is there and can tell me otherwise, I am calling on us to have a vote on the question that we now not go into confidential business as Councillor Harkin proposed, and I second it.
And Councillor Doyle, that's an entirely valid proposition, and if the Mayor wishes to move forward on that basis, that's entirely within the Mayor's gift as chair of the meeting.
Thank you, John. Okay, members, obviously it's getting very confusing here. I did put a proposal to go into confidential, and then Councillor Harkin came in with a seconder. I'm not too sure if I had a seconder on before that, so I would like to take a vote now on whether I'd like to go ahead now with what Councillor Doyle's proposed.
Chair, just let me in. Chair, I'm not sure what I'm voting for because one is the next item on the agenda in public going to be around Pacific employees. Is that what you're saying is next on the agenda?
I'm going to bring the Chief Executive in here.
Thank you, Mayor, for bringing me in. Members, no, it was to provide members with an opportunity just to be briefed on the notice we have received from Unite the Union in terms of proposed action, the key issues associated with it, and the key considerations in the next week or two. Obviously, it's a fairly major issue for Council that we face today, and it was to provide members with an opportunity to be briefed on that and to discuss the matter. And clearly, as it is a very sensitive issue, and around strike action, the proposal was that it was discussed initially in confidential business.
Okay, Councillor Doyle. So Councillor Doyle, is more or less looking to stay in current business. Okay, I'm going to pass now to John to take us to vote on that. Members, you all happy? You all happy?
What's the question?
Councillor Doyle, could you take us forward?
Sorry, Mary, you had an echo there. I couldn't hear you.
Councillor Doyle, could you explain what we're voting for here? Is to remain in this business?
It's to remain in open business as the proposal from Councillor Harkin was put forward.
Thank you. Okay, members, I'm going to accept that. So, John, could you take us through the vote, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Alderman Breslin. Alderman Devaney,
Against, John.
Alderman Hussey, Alderman Hussey, Alderman Carrigan, Alderman McClintock,
Against, John.
Alderman Wark,
Yes, John.
Councillor Jason Barr,
For.
Councillor Raymond Barr,
For.
Councillor John Boyle,
For.
Councillor Michaela Boyle,
For John.
Councillor Carr,
For, John.
Councillor Cusick,
For.
Councillor Dobbins,
For John.
Councillor Donnelly,
For.
Councillor Doyle,
For.
Councillor Duffy,
For.
Councillor Edwards,
For, John.
Councillor Farrell,
For.
Councillor Ferguson,
For John.
Councillor Fleming,
For, John.
Councillor Gallagher,
For.
Councillor Harkin,
For.
Councillor Heaney,
For.
Councillor Jackson,
For.
Councillor Kelly,
For.
Councillor Logue, Councillor Logue,
For John.
Councillor McGinley,
For John.
Councillor McGowan,
For, John.
Councillor Mooney,
For.
Councillor O'Neill,
For.
Councillor Riley,
For.
Councillor Senoy Barr,
For John.
Councillor Tierney.
For.
Thank you, members.
John, I'm here. Councillor McHugh, for.
And Alderman Hussey is in 2, 4, and Councillor McHugh, 4. Members, I'm going to close this now and count, please. Mayor, that's 29 for and 3 against. So the proposal is carried.
Okay, members, obviously members have spoken and the gut feel saying we have a crisis here. So Councillor Hargan, let's bring his proposal onto the table here. We bring it up, members. Okay, Councillor Hargan, do you want to go on?
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks everyone who voted to continue the discussion. I think it's this cost of living crisis meeting is probably one of the most important we've had. And look, if we were in a situation where Westminster and the Stormont executive had done more, we wouldn't have to try to figure out ways to assist our residents as a council. And I think it would be maybe it is unprecedented for a council to take this action, but when I think as everybody has spoken to today, you know, people right across our district in all communities are getting hit very, very hard by the oil, gas, petrol, electricity prices. And not just that, other household prices as well are all going up, and it looks like it's only going in one way. And the help that's been given to people so far, while it will be welcomed to people, whether it's through the Bryson Charity Fund or through the Energy Payment Scheme, or if it's workers who got you know, pay raises recently, all of that will help them somewhat, but it's going to come nowhere close to helping them. If we support this proposal today to utilise the £3 million that we have in unspent COVID funding that is there for a rainy day, and this is a rainy day, it will not solve everybody's problems, but it will at least show that we are alert and understand the difficulties that people across our district are facing right now. It'll also, I believe, put more pressure on the executive or on the executive parties, because there isn't an executive right now, to find ways to utilise the £300 million that is sitting there and that should be getting utilised. I think we have to keep the pressure on the executive and on Westminster for more serious action, and there is all sorts of proposals to do that, and I back anything that will help people get through this crisis, as I'm sure everybody else will. But I think by taking this action today, I think it'll send a message that that we are serious about trying to address this, and that we're going to do everything that we can. So I hope that people, I know that people have commented on this already, so it's clear people have given it some thought. I hope that people will back this proposal today. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Hargan, you have a second there. Councillor Farrell?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So the first thing I would say is that gas, oil, and electricity prices are an absolute disgrace, and that very few people across our city and district are not feeling the pain of these energy prices going through the roof. People need help, they need support, and they need it urgently. And there's plenty in Councillor Harkin's proposal which we support, but there's one element that we cannot. This motion asks for £3 million to be allocated to a hardship fund. The reality is that that £3 million is not available, and that has been clearly and adequately outlined by the lead finance officer. The £3 million, which equates to about £20 a head for every man, woman and child living in this council area, simply isn't available. We have a legal obligation to keep money in reserves. We are faced with increasing fuel and energy costs. We've got a pay award and we've got a loss of car parking and leisure incomes that this £3 million is earmarked for. We do, however, support the establishment of a working group, and we need input from the National Energy Action, local advice providers and anti-poverty campaigners, and we need to explore ways to assist households right across the city and district who are facing under this cost of living crisis. The working group must report to Council with a suite of fully costed deliverable actions for agreement and approval. And I would emphasise the word deliverable, because we can't make proposals that this council doesn't have the power or capacity to deliver on. And I would remind members that we established a £50,000 hardship fund in the run-up to Christmas 2020, and we did not have the power or capacity to allocate all of that money, and that was only £50,000. People need help and support, but we need to be realistic as a council about the help and support that we can offer, and the working group is the place to agree what can be actually delivered. So with that in mind, Mayor, I've got an amendment which I'm going to put in the chat box, and I would like to replace the first two paragraphs with this text and just keep the third paragraph in place. So that's a proposal on behalf of the SDLP, and I would like a seconder, please. Thank you.
Be a seconder, Commissioner Wright. Clara?
I'll second that, Lillian Semmelbar.
Thank you. Just 2 seconds. Councillor Farrell, this is actually changes as we look at the original motion, the first paragraph on that, so I'm not going to be taking that as an amendment. Okay, members, moving on. Councillor Doyle on the motion, or the proposal, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I, as I mentioned in my previous remarks, would gladly sell this council's family silver if it meant that people would sit in the house freezing. And I'm happy to support this motion because, and I was happy to second it because I don't necessarily, and I'm not trying to be flippant about this, but I don't necessarily think that every single person at this meeting knows what it's like to sit in a house with no heating. But for one person to do it in this city is wrong. For hundreds, if not thousands of people in this city and district to do it is criminal. And, you know, look, I would quite gladly give the mayoral chain from around your neck, Mayor, to someone to go and sell to heat their house if that's what it meant, because that is supposed to be what we're here for. You know, if we had a bit of a heated meeting, and I think that's fair enough. I think that's, you know, what putting ideas across is for. I do take it quite personally, the comments that Councillor Riley made about logs, because, well, when I was doing something about it, him and his party weren't. But that's all I'll say about it. In terms of going forward, what I'd like to say, I don't have an amendment. I'm not going to seek to amend the motion, but what I would say is, from my perspective, when we say council agrees to immediately set up a working group, you know, I can't be any clearer. That means this week. You know, I know people are busy, but this is a massive, serious problem. We need to be having a working group meeting, you know, every day until we get to the point where this is ready to go, because we can't be waiting months to give out support to people. And I think I made a valid point as well, Mayor. Probably, I was probably in error in saying it when Councillor Riley was speaking. But you know, I've had a number of people ask me, and I'm going to put it onto this meeting, not as a proposal, just as a question, and I leave people to answer it in whatever way they like. We are telling people that we can't spend money to help them out when they're struggling, especially people who are working. The Foyle MP and all 5 Foyle MLAs are due a pay rise. Some of it's only £500 for the MLAs, but I think it's 2.2 grand, I think, for the MP. I could be wrong. I think people deserve to know, if you're standing in solidarity with the people you serve, will you forego that and give it to charity who are going to help people with the cost of living crisis? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Doyle. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mayor. Mayor, I'm going to table an amendment to the motion that's in front of us. I'm putting it in the chat box now.
Seconded.
Mayor, the amendment is
Just
placed.
2 seconds here, Councillor Jackson. Could the committee clerk put the original motion on up in the screen, please? Okay, members, looking on that amendment, I think the key issue here is, sorry, can I bring that on the screen to right to the top of it? I'm just looking here. The council agrees, so I am not going to take that. I am not going to take that, Councillor Jackson, and I'm going to move on, members. I think it takes away the key here with the.
John Boyle here, point of order.
No,
Mayor, can you
Councillor
explain
Boyle.
to us why you're not taking these amendments?
Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead. 1 minute, members. We bring in John here.
Thank you, Mayor, for bringing me in. I think the Mayor's deliberations in both of the previous suggested amendments were in relation to standing orders where any amendment cannot effectively negate the notice of motion that is on the table. The previous notice of motion, while agreeing with the establishment of the working group, by removing the paragraph that set out that council utilises its resources of £3 million reserves, effectively negated the substantial part of the notice of motion. With regard to the current suggested amendment on the floor, albeit that it still comprises the majority of actions that are set out in the original notice of motion. The key issue in the original notice of motion is the utilisation of Council's £3 million reserves. That can't be got away from. There is as the city solicitor and legal services officer said many times, this is the challenge that the mayor faces with notices of motion that have multiple actions associated with it. The mayor then has to weigh up the nature of those actions and what the key issue is behind the original notice of motion. So the key issue in relation to the original notice of motion is the utilisation of council reserves. And on that basis, the mayor has deemed this amendment to be inadmissible because it substantively negates the key issue in the original notice of motion. Thank you.
Mayor, can I come on very, very briefly on that? It's Councillor Farrell. I had put a message in the chat box asking for clarity on when my original amendment was not accepted. And I have listened to what the Chief Executive has said, and respectfully, I disagree with it. The key point of this motion is not about £3 million. It's about helping people. That's what it's about. And we don't want to put a figure on it for the reasons that I have outlined originally in my speaking notes. But it's about setting up a working group to find out what we can realistically do to help people that are suffering at the minute. That's what the motion's about. And with all respect, I think it should be accepted.
Thank you for that, Councillor Farrell. There is a working group set up, and that's where it's all going to be discussed. So it is. So Alderman, I'm moving on, members. On the original proposal on the table by Councillor Hargan, Alderman McClintock.
Thank you, Mayor. And this does get more confusing by the minute, but actually, your decision and the explanation from our Chief Executive does make it easier. We in the DUP cannot support the original motion put forward by Councillor Harkin. We have long debated during this meeting the reasons for that. I don't intend to go over them again, but we cannot leave ourselves without a reserve fund. As regards I absolutely think that a working group, whether it's already established or new, is the way forward. I must confess to having sympathy with the notice or the amendment put forward by Councillor Farrell. Maybe if that was brought as a separate proposal, that it was something that we could certainly accept. Well, there's no point in going into others. You've already made a ruling on them, but I do think anything that does contain using the COVID savings of £3 million is absolutely not acceptable. So on that, we will be voting against this in its present form. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Ferguson.
Mayor, there's another proposal in the chat box. If you don't mind, I'm going to wait until all the proposals have come through and speak on the substantive. Is that okay?
Yeah, Councillor Duffy.
Sorry, Mayor, mine was to table my original proposal that I had earlier, so I'll wait until this debate is complete.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Ferguson. We'll talk on this one.
Mayor, it's from Alderman Hussey there in the chat box. There's a proposal.
Alderman Hussey, have you a seconder?
Not at the moment.
Okay, members, have we a seconder for Alderman Hussey's amendment?
Mayor, can we see the amendment, please?
The amendment's on the chat box. Members, can I have a seconder? I'm going to move on here to keep this meeting going.
We can't really see it. Where is it in the chat?
Yeah. It's now on screen, Mayor.
Okay, members, have we a seconder for the amendment here? If there's not in the next 5 seconds, I'm moving on.
Mayor, can you give us a chance to see it? I can't see it anywhere in that chat box.
It's on screen now, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. I have in front of here in the chat box too.
Mayor, I'm prepared to second it so that people can have a debate on it before you move on. So happy to second it so that we can treat it as a debate.
Okay, members, we have thank you. We have a proposal and seconder here, members, on amendment. Councillor McGowan, do you want to speak on the amendment?
I just thank you. I just want to say what I said at the beginning. We all came here today to try and do something. My concern from the very beginning of this meeting was we needed to know what the latitude to do something was. Now, I agreed with a lot within Councillor Hargan's motion. I think we all did. My only concern was knowing what we could do. The other concern I had was, you know, with 3 million, you can give £50 a head across this area. It won't solve the problem, but it does send the clear message out that we're that desperate that this is what we have to do. Of course, it would be much better if we knew the 3 million from the DFC and the 3 million from the energy companies was something that we could realistically achieve in these short time scales. So that's all I wanted to say. I mean, you know, I'm glad the meeting has picked up again, and I'm glad that we stayed here because people out there want solutions, they want answers. That's all I wanted to say. That, you know, we've got to bear in mind. I've asked Alfie, I asked John Kilby, I asked the officers. I'm not going to ask again, just to make sure that if we're passing a motion, are we legally able to do that? And I think we've all said that. That was the only caveat that I put on. We definitely need to do something. But if it ends up that this comes to be voted on, we're not desperate at time, and we know that. And I'm delighted that we stayed here because we're actually doing something or trying to do something now. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Farrell. Is this on the amendment?
Mayor, may I address the amendment?
Sorry, Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Mayor. I've simply proposed this on the basis, as members will recall earlier on in the debate, I clarified with Alfie what is actually possible. And what is possible is if funds become available, and that's the situation we're in. If funds become available from that unspent reserve, they can be used elsewhere. But you know, if we have a commitment, we cannot take away from the reserve whilst there is a demand on that reserve. So it's simply that if funds become available, we can use them for the Hardship Emergency Fund. Meanwhile, we look for match funding from the other bodies. The rest of it, the motion there is quite open, and you know, support all of it, the working group and all of the rest of it, liaison with the various bodies, etc. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Farrell.
Yeah, I'm very briefly, Mayor. Happy to support Alderman Hussey's amendment on behalf of the SDLP. Obviously, we would have preferred if you had have accepted our amendment, which I thought was clear and coherent and made sense, but unfortunately, it wasn't our day. We can support this. You know, we didn't want to vote against the substantive motion, but you know, the fact that he didn't let us amend it with something I viewed as very sensible is disappointing. But in terms of the proposal, yeah, anything that does become available, but it's how long is a bit of string? How are we going to know when money does become available, because there's so many competing pressures? But at least it gives us something to go on. So thank you, Mayor.
Okay, members, I see no further speakers in this amendment. So, members, I see no dissenting voices here on this. Anybody wishing to go against the amendment? Could you let me know now on the chat box?
Yeah, if you're asking for, there is dissenting voices, so I'm happy to speak to that.
Who's the dissenting voice? I haven't heard none, but go ahead, Councillor Hargan.
Well, look, yeah, I'm opposed to this amendment. I think that the £3 million is there. I talked to Alfie about this. This is not money that is tied up for something else. This is money that is kept, that we received during the pandemic, that has been described for a rainy day. This is a rainy day. This is a massive rainy day for a lot of people in our district. Everybody in this meeting has now knows how bad things are, and we can't say that we're going to spend this money. When does it become available? That's the question. Now, this is not the only reserves that the council has. This is specific COVID money that is unspent. The council has other money, and people should be clear on that. And when we had the discussions about council finances, that was made clear as well. So we would oppose this, and we want to stick to the original motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Doyle.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll be very brief. I'm concerned about the language in terms of utilise any funds that become available, because I generally think that there are people out there who can't wait a day, never mind how long that would take. And on that basis, I can't support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Donnelly.
No, I can't support this. It's too there's too much ambiguity. It's allowing politicians to have their cake and eat it, and it takes away from the motion. So I won't be supporting it.
Okay, Councillor Donnelly, and finally Councillor Ferguson.
Mayor, the original motion, I think any of us would love to spend £3 million and give it out to people in hardship. I think that the reason that there was a bit of uncertainty was the impact that it would have on council and council staff, and where Councillor Doyle says he would sell the council jewels for someone to heat their home, I am in agreement with, but at the same vein, we sell the council jewels for make sure someone has a warm house at night may result in someone else ending up with a cold house because they've lost their job or their increase in wages. So, Mayor, I understand Councillor Harkin's disagreement with this amendment, but also if the funds are available for us to use, like he says they are, then this shouldn't necessarily change it. But what this does do is give us a wee bit of security that we aren't going to cause a negative impact to council and council staff. And I'm hoping that with this motion still going through, that we are still able to have that proposed meeting with the hardship working group, that we could identify other funds for the hardship fund with Alfie, and not necessarily just the COVID funds, because I think we need to just get around that table and away from the politics and just figure out what money we can get out in the ground and what money we can get out in the ground tomorrow and next week. And I agree with Councillor Doyle where we have the meeting as soon as possible, but also that puts a lot of pressure on council officers to come up with recommendations. But anybody has recommendations or solutions, bring it to the table on the first day, and let's not rely on council officers, and we can sit, I'll go every day and try and figure out a way forward. So, Mayor, on that, I'm happy to support the amendment because I was unsure on the impact of the original motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ferguson, and that meeting will be going ahead so as soon as possible. So, members, I'm going to now pass the John to take us through a vote on the amendment. John.
There.
Thank you. Sorry. Sorry, Mayor. What do you want to do? Do you want to proceed with the vote? Thank you, Mayor. Members, Alderman Devaney. Alderman Devaney on the amendment, please. Alderman Hussey.
For Joel. Alderman Devaney here for.
Thank you. Alderman Hussey.
For.
Alderman Carrigan. Alderman McClintock.
For.
Alderman Wark.
For.
Councillor Jason Barr.
For.
Councillor Raymond Barr.
Against.
Councillor John Boyle.
For.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
For John.
Councillor Carr.
Against John.
Councillor Cusick.
For.
Councillor Dobbins.
For John.
Councillor Donnelly,
Against.
Councillor Doyle,
Against.
Councillor Duffy,
For.
Councillor Edwards,
For.
Councillor Farrell,
For.
Councillor Ferguson,
For.
Councillor Fleming,
For John.
Councillor Gallagher,
Against.
Councillor Harkin,
Against.
Councillor Heaney,
For John.
Councillor Jackson,
For John.
Councillor Kelly,
For John.
Councillor Logue,
For.
Councillor McGinley,
For John.
Councillor McGowan,
For John.
Councillor McHugh,
For.
Councillor Mooney,
For.
Councillor O'Neill,
Against.
Councillor Riley,
For John.
Councillor Sinoy Barr,
For John.
Councillor Tierney.
For John.
Thank you, members. Mayor, I've recorded 25 for and 7 against, so the amendment is carried.
Okay, members, moving on to the substantial motion. Councillor Doyle.
Thanks, Mayor. Really quickly, I'm trying to get my head around the implications of this amendment. Could maybe John or Alfie, in terms of a purely accounting sense, when do they think funds will become available? You know, are we talking about, will we know that at the end of this financial year, or is it something that could take, you know, in terms of an accounting timetable? When do they think they would be in a position to know what funds will become available arising from the 3 million hardship? Thanks.
Mayor, through you, it's a very good question, Councillor Doyle. Look, it's one that we've, I think Alfie has tried to address on a number of occasions during the meeting. I think one of the issues was to try and get the working group established as quickly as possible. We can perhaps bring some thinking into that working group, but obviously we need to take away the notice of motion, should the substantive notice of motion be passed here this evening, and consider the implications of it.
Okay, members, we're going to move on now to substantial motion. I see no further speakers here. Or sorry, there was somebody looking to come in. Was it Councillor Ferguson? You're looking to come in? Or
No, Mayor, I'm happy enough. I spoke on the amendment.
right? Okay, members, I'm going to move this on now. So I'm going to take it now to John to take us through a vote. John.
Thank you, members. So on the substantive notice of motion now, Alderman Devaney.
For.
Alderman Hussey.
For.
Alderman McClintock.
For John.
I'm for John here, Alderman Kerrigan. Sorry, I missed the last one.
My apologies, Alderman Kerrigan. Thank you. Alderman Wark.
For.
Councillor Jason Barr.
For.
Councillor Raymond Barr.
For.
Councillor John Boyle.
For.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
For John.
Councillor Carr.
For John.
Councillor Cusick.
For.
Councillor Dobbins. Councillor Dobbins.
For John. Sorry, I couldn't get it.
Councillor Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Doyle. Councillor Doyle. Councillor Duffy.
For.
Councillor Edwards.
For.
Councillor Farrell.
For.
Councillor Ferguson.
For John.
Councillor Fleming.
For John. For John.
Councillor Gallagher.
For.
Councillor Harkin,
For.
Councillor Heaney,
For.
Councillor Jackson,
For.
Councillor Kelly,
For.
Councillor Logue,
For.
Councillor McGinley,
For, John.
Councillor McGowan,
For, John.
Councillor McHugh,
For, John.
Councillor Minnie,
For.
Councillor O'Neill,
For.
Councillor Riley,
For, John.
Councillor
For,
Stephen
John.
O'Barr,
For, John.
Councillor Tierney.
For, John.
Thank you, Mayor. Members, that was unanimous and with 32 voting members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
Mayor,
members.
as a mover, can I sum up?
Yeah, of course you can.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, again, we can't emphasize the difficulties that people in our district face, and it's going to get worse this weekend, and it's going to get worse in the next couple of weeks and the next couple of months. And we have organisations saying that we're in wartime conditions, and we have organisations saying that people are going to face destitution, and we already have people who are not able to buy the oil because of the skyrocketing prices. And as far as we are concerned, we believe that the executive parties have done their best to derail the thrust of this proposal today, and have attempted to water it down. Now, even this motion, as far as we are concerned, the money is available right now, and we are going to be doing our best to make sure that this money is put to helping our residents through a hardship emergency fund, and that needs to happen immediately. And we will fight that legally if necessary, because we know the money is here. So this was an attempt to delay this. I think that people will try to interpret this as they wish, but on Monday, the £3 million is available. It is not tied up elsewhere, and I think it is just an injustice that people come on here and talk about protecting workers' rights, and workers when they have allowed Stormont to impose Tory pay cuts on health workers, where some have voted against a workers' rights bill last week in Stormont that would actually allow workers to more easily campaign and fight for increased wages. So look, people will see through this hypocrisy, but I think that we're going to continue to push and make sure that this money that the council has is now utilised as part of a hardship fund, and that we do go now and have a serious campaign to the Department for Communities asking for this £3 million to be match fund, and going out as well to energy companies and big corporations that are making huge profits and made huge profits during the pandemic, that they actually are compelled and pressured to actually match fund this hardship fund that the council is going to set up. So we're disappointed that this has been watered down. We're disappointed that parties have made an attempt to do that, but we are going to insist that the money is available right now and should be immediately going into helping the least well off workers and vulnerable people across our district. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hargan. Okay, members, thank you, Councillor Duffy, for bringing this special meeting. Obviously, there is a crisis here on the ground, and I think every person on this here today is well aware about that. Members, I am now going to propose if we would go into
Mayor, sorry, I'm really apologise, but I have a proposal that I tried to table earlier that was ruled out on the back of Councillor Harkin's motion being ruled out. I accepted that at the time.
Councillor Duffy,
I would now like to propose that I move that proposal now.
Yeah, Councillor Duffy, I'm happy to do it. I apologise, I was jumping there, but what I'm going to do here, members, going to actually take a comfort break for 5 minutes, and then we're going to get that brought up on the table, and we'll discuss that as well. So members, 5 minutes. Okay, members, welcome back. We're going to bring Councillor Duffy's proposal on the table here.
Cormac, Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Duffy, have you a second there?
Already seconded, Mayor. Councillor Heaney.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I had called this meeting today and I had called it in really good faith in terms of trying to find genuine solutions to some of the issues that our residents are facing and for us to work together as a council. It has been sort of unfortunate how the meeting has played out, but hopefully at this stage, I'm glad we have sort of got back on track and we have been able to make some practical suggestions here. Some of the suggestions brought forward by council officers in terms of how we can actually practically get some help out and on the ground and what we can do as a council. But I suppose in terms of bringing this motion, it's around if we're really going to make a difference in people's lives, then we need to also be looking at the wider politics, the bigger changes that we need, the implementation of wider policy and the budget allocation. And that is where we will make a huge difference to our citizens. And that is what the removal of VAT, the windfall tax on the big energy companies, the scrapping of national insurance contributions, and of course then the red diesel issue. So I have brought this motion today to sort of tackle those issues and also to ensure that we get some way where we can get the budget agreed, we can get the £300 million agreed, and we can get that out and into people's pockets, because those are the big decisions. These are the big issues that are actually going to make the biggest difference in people's lives who are actually struggling now. So that is why I have brought this proposal. I'm not going to talk any further on it. We know the issues that people are facing. We know the hardships that they're facing, and we have gone over them today and they are well versed. So I would like to table this proposal. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Fred. Councillor Duffy, Councillor Riley on the proposal.
Yeah, Mayor, thanks for bringing me in, and thanks to Councillor Duffy for tabling this. I think that it is incumbent, as I said in my earlier remarks, that across all the elected places that politicians find themselves, so that be it here in this chamber, in the Assembly or at Westminster, we need to be making sure that we're doing all that we can to try and alleviate the pressures that are facing the citizens that we are elected to serve. So I welcome the proposal here by Councillor Duffy to try and take some action in relation to what the Assembly can do. As I indicated earlier when answering points made by others, that the SDLP did bring forward proposals back last year in terms of energy policy, and we, in the absence of a First Minister, meaning that the executive can't meet, we have also called for both at Westminster and in the Assembly for emergency legislation to pass to deal with the emergency that all of us find ourselves in. So, Mayor, we're happy with the proposal here from Councillor Duffy, but we do have a very small amendment to it, which I'll pop into the chat box, is to go in on the third paragraph. So, Mayor, if you bear with me, I'll just stick that in the chat box now. Thank you. Mayor, apologies, it's in block capitals, but that's the way I typed it up. But it's to go at the end of the third paragraph. Thank you, Mayor.
We'll just get this up the screen here just to see it. 2 seconds, Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Mayor, and to the committee clerk for getting it onto the screen. So as the amendment indicates, it's to support the.
Just 2 seconds there, just to get. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Riley. Have you a seconder on that?
I'll second that, Councillor Farrell.
Thank you. Go ahead,
Yes.
Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Mayor. So as I was indicating, it's to
No.
support. Sorry, Mayor, is there somebody has have the mic on? I'll try again, Mayor.
Members, could you make sure your mics are all off there, please? Go ahead, Councillor Riley.
So as I said, Mayor, it's just to support Councillor Duffy's original motion, but to add to it that this council should be supporting emergency legislation if it's needed. Obviously, the preferred option would be for the executive to be restored to allow this to happen, but in the absence of that emergency legislation should be brought forward, and the existing DFC scheme that Minister Hargey has put together for a payment support that was to be paid earlier this week to people. That is very welcome. I spoke to a lady on pension credit this morning who was very happy to hear that was coming for her, but she's also conscious that not everybody will be receiving that. And I think that that's one way that an assembly department could make a change that would affect everybody. We have other examples as well. We have the likes of the Department of Health facing calls for the cost of living, prices of fuel increases for staff travelling around to do their work, that should also be legislated for and changed. So I think that the best way to deal with all of this is to a fully functioning executive, but in the absence of that, we do need the emergency legislation. So that's why we're happy to move this amendment to strengthen the original motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Riley. Okay, members, we have an amendment on the table. Alderman Devaney, do you wish to speak on the amendment?
Chair, with your recognition, I would like to speak on both, just the amendment and the
Go ahead.
On the amendment, look, we have no problem with the amendment. We do support that everyone should be receiving help, because we're all very much aware now of very much the working poor. But Mr. Mayor, we will be abstaining on this because it asks for a restoration of the executive, and the proposer here knows right well that her and her party suspended collapse Stormont for 3 years over equality rights and respect and an Irish Language Act. I think it's laughable that they would call for this. And let's be honest, the DUP has been warning at around the collapse of Stormont since Christmas, while there were some, sitting back wondering will it happen, if it happened, and it has happened. But Chair, in around when I look at the motion coming forward here, the very last paragraph, we've agreed all of that. And our party have been very much to the fore in talking to the Westminster government around the VAT issue and then around the cost of living. And I know our party has been very, very much, and our party leader. And look, there is legislation that is able to go through Assembly, and I think any legislation like this will go through, even with the DUP not having a First Minister there. But Chair, Mayor, we will be abstaining on this, but support most of the motion, except the bit where it calls just for the restoration. As I said earlier on, our party did warn about the collapse of Stormont, and it has happened. But thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Fred Alderman Devaney. Councillor Gallagher, on the amendment?
On the amendment, Chair, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll not be supporting this amendment, Chair, and I'll tell you why, because there's a growing gap, and it's growing wider and wider between the rich and the poor across these islands, and there are people that are doing extremely well out of the crisis that we find ourselves in. And what this amendment is doing is we should be rewarding them and giving them £200. That's what that's saying. What we should be doing is saying, how much money have we got, and can we give £400 to those in extreme need, £200 to those in working poor, and none to those who are wealthy. And that's what we should be doing, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Councillor Hargan, on the amendment?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just speak generally to the issue and to
go
the
ahead.
amendment. Thank you. Look, I want to send my solidarity to the Derry Against Fuel Poverty group, who are right now at the Strand Road council offices, and many people have followed the discussion that we previously had and are very frustrated and angry about it, because I think that we missed an opportunity to take real action. I think that the what's happened in Stormont is a disgrace, where we had an opportunity in December to back a hardship emergency motion, where we could have put the proper kind of financial funds into helping people for the crisis that we knew was coming. And barely any of the executive parties signed up for that. Sinn Féin didn't, the SDLP didn't, the DUP certainly didn't. A hardship emergency protest was ignored. And now what we have is executive parties attempting to make it look like they are taking emergency action when the emergency action needed to happen months ago. We back any proposal that is going to help people right now, that's going to help, make sure that people don't fall into destitution. Stormont should be finding a way of utilising whatever funding is available to do that. And what we get is political point scoring by the big parties. And the people that are going to suffer are working class people in all communities. That's who is suffering right now. That's who this crisis is hitting hardest. And I think what the key thing now is not going to be another motion from Sinn Féin making it look like they're doing something, or an SDLP amendment. It is going to be people power, and the people power protests are going to have to grow, because what's clear is that there's an unwillingness by the establishment parties to take radical action, and radical action that upsets the cozy consensus between the big parties and business and elites. They're not willing to shake that up, and that's exactly what we need to do. We need to be shifting wealth that's in the hands of a tiny minority of people, and putting and transferring that wealth into working class households, into vital services, and into pay raises. So we back anything that will attempt to do that, but we think that people power is going to be the key way to do it right now. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hargan. Councillor Doyle, on the amendment?
On the amendment, Mayor, I can't support it on the basis that, as I mentioned in my initial comments, the Speaker of the Assembly, in agreement with the Business Committee on the 15th, of which all executive parties and parties in the Assembly are members, sent a letter to them all saying that they had all agreed that even the last number of private members' bills that were on second stage at that point wouldn't even get to the end of their process. And we've seen that play out. So, to talk about emergency legislation, it was an emergency in August, and those parties did nothing. I see just because I see my phone buzzing there that the SDLP rearguard are already on social media trying to play out the fact that they didn't support the £3 million right now, but are happy to spend it at some time in the future. And let's be clear, as I said on the chat box, Mayor, not that I need to determine it for any members here. My laptop froze whenever I was voting on the substantive motion. I was more than happy to support it because at least I know what side my bread's buttered on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Doyle. Councillor Cusack?
Thank you, Chair. And
it's on the amendments. Apologies.
Yes, on the amendment, Chair. But first, just like to say how I'm absolutely deflated the way this meeting has gone today, and how people have used it as a platform to make personal attacks and also party attacks, and they try and seem self-righteous on one issue and another, when here is all about trying to help people. On the amendment, this amendment is actually out there to help everybody who is struggling, because there's divisions being put in the rhetoric of many people, like, oh, just because you're working, you're okay, or if you're on benefits, you're not okay. That's causing massive division. I know a lot of people who are working, and they're working poor. People come on here and they're talking about supporting the people, supporting, quote unquote, the working class. The clues in the name: working class, working people who still can't afford to pay their bills but are getting absolutely no help whatsoever. And lots of people are telling me this isn't fair. We need this support for everybody. If you've got a lot of money, let your conscience be your guide and give the money back or pay it forward to somebody who needs it. But this is fair, this is equitable, and this is about supporting everybody in a crisis, not just selecting who you want to support and who you don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Councillor Duffy on the amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a comment on Alderman Devaney. How dare Sinn Féin call for respect? You know, I think Morris would need to remember that there was an issue around RHI, and there's probably sheds in Fermanagh that's warmer than homes in Derry tonight. So I think it would be good to remember that. I would also say that the DUP have prioritised their own self-interest over getting the executive back up. They have pulled it down to appease a small number of people regarding a protocol instead of getting back in there and getting food on the working families' tables. In terms of the amendment, we won't support it. We make no apologies for prioritising those who are most vulnerable. And just to put on record again, Deirdre did explore how to get money out for those who were on tax credits, but HMRC refused to share their databases. So that was something that she tried to do and couldn't do. So I don't know where we would move on from that. I believe that the original motion is strong enough. And just to say, in terms of Councillor Cusack, I have to agree with her. I am really disappointed at the tone of the meeting today, but we're sticking with the original motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, members. I see no further speakers on the amendment. I'm going to pass to John now to take us through a vote. John.
Thank you, Mayor. So on the amendment, Alderman Devaney.
Abstain, John.
Alderman Hussey. Alderman Hussey.
For.
Alderman Carrigan. Alderman Carrigan. Alderman McClintock.
Abstain, John.
Alderman Wark.
Abstain.
Councillor Jason Barr.
For.
Councillor Raymond Barr.
Against.
Councillor John Boyle.
For.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
Against.
Councillor Carr.
Against, John.
Councillor Cusack.
For.
Councillor Dobbins.
For, John.
Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Doyle.
Against.
Councillor Duffy.
Against.
Councillor Edwards.
For.
Councillor Farrell.
For.
Councillor Ferguson.
Abstain, John.
Councillor Fleming.
Against, John.
Councillor Gallagher.
Against.
Councillor Harkin. Councillor Harkin.
For.
Councillor Heaney.
Against, John.
Councillor Jackson. Councillor Jackson.
Against, John.
Councillor Kelly.
Against, John.
Councillor Logue. Councillor McGinley.
Against, John.
Councillor McGowan.
Against.
Councillor Rooney.
For.
Councillor O'Neill.
For.
Councillor Riley.
For, John.
Councillor Seanoy Barr.
For, John.
Councillor Tierney.
For.
Thank you, members. Going to move to the count now.
John, you didn't call my name there, Councillor McHugh.
Councillor McHugh.
Against.
McHugh. Is that, sorry, pardon? Sorry, members, I'm going to call this one last time. I'm going to move to the count. So I've got Councillor McHugh coming in with what vote, Councillor McHugh?
Against, John.
Against, and in the chat box, Alderman Carrigan abstaining. Members are moving to the account now, so no more Calls, please. Mayor, I've recorded 13 for, 14 against, and 5 abstentions. So the amendment falls.
Thank you, John. Okay, members, moving now to the substantial motion. Go ahead there, Alderman Jose.
Thank you, Mayor. And it's really just to ask the proposer of the motion. It's my understanding that Westminster would not have the authority to change the VAT rate in Northern Ireland without permission from the EU. Can somebody clarify that, please? Thank you.
Two seconds here, Alderman Jose. Alderman Hussey, I know I see Alderman McClintock on this here. We wouldn't have that answer. There will have to come back on that one, but members, I wouldn't be too sure, and I'm be too sure here.
Mayor, other EU countries have allowed the VAT rate to drop, so I'm sure if the British government requested it, it would be granted.
With the permission of the EU? They can't do it on their own.
Mayor, come in, my name's in the chat.
Yeah, go ahead, Alderman McClintock.
Thanks, Mayor. My understanding is the same as Alderman Hussey raised there. It is one of the direct effects, disadvantages that the protocol is having on us here in Northern Ireland. The legislation does not allow us in Northern Ireland, does not allow Westminster to change the VAT rate in Northern Ireland, and of that I'm sure. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, members, I see no further speakers on this. Councillor Duffy, do you want to sum up?
Mayor, I think that everything that possibly could be said has been said. I want to send my solidarity to everyone within our council area who is struggling. This is a Friday, this is a weekend. People often struggle more when statutory services are closed down. I hope that, this meeting, the tone of it, the conduct of it was disappointing. But I hope that we have made some decisions that will make an impact on people's lives who are struggling. And that was my intention in this meeting. And I do hope that people support this substantive motion that I have brought. It is a motion that can bring real and substantive change to people's lives in terms of the spiraling cost of living, bring some hope that there is a resolution out there. We know it's a global crisis. We know that with what's going on in the Ukraine, that it can and has the potential to get much worse. But I do hope that our governments across these islands can step in and make some difference to people's lives. And I hope that the practical solutions that we came up with today in terms of our council area will make a difference to people's lives as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Duffy. Okay, substantial motion. I'm going to pass to John now to take us through a vote. John?
Thanks, Mayor. Alderman Devaney?
Abstain, John.
Alderman Carrigan?
Abstain, John.
Alderman Hussey?
On the basis of my query, abstain.
Alderman McClintock?
Abstain, John.
Alderman Wark,
Abstain, John.
Councillor Jason Barr,
For.
Councillor Raymond Barr,
Abstain, John.
Councillor John Boyle,
Or.
Councillor Michaela Boyle,
For John.
Councillor Carr,
For John.
Councillor Cusick,
For.
Councillor Dobbins,
For John.
Councillor Donnelly, Councillor Donnelly, Councillor Doyle,
Against, John.
Councillor Duffy,
For.
Councillor Edwards,
For.
Councillor Farrell,
For.
Councillor Ferguson,
For John.
Councillor Fleming,
For John.
Councillor Gallagher,
For.
Councillor Harkin,
For.
Councillor Heaney,
For.
Councillor Jackson,
For.
Councillor Kelly,
For.
Councillor Logue,
John.
Councillor McGinley,
For John.
Councillor McGowan,
For John.
Councillor McHugh,
For John.
Councillor Mooney,
For.
Councillor O'Neill,
For.
Councillor Riley,
For John.
Councillor Stenoy Barr,
For John.
Councillor Tierney.
For John.
Thank you, members. I have recorded 25 for, 1 against, and 6 abstentions. So the motion passes.
Thank you, John, and also thank you, members. Obviously, a very long meeting there and very important issues to discuss. So what I'd like to do now is have proposed to go into confidential. Could I have a
Propose, Mayor.
could I have a
Second,
second? Appreciate it.